from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of the program. Happy to be here, and if you want to join us, I'm looking forward to the conversation. 833-482-5337 is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. So today we're talking about the big lie, right? The big lie. What is the big lie? There's always a different big lie going on, but this one, the economy, Kamala's economy, Bidenomics, Kamala-nomics, 818,000 fake jobs, lies, all lies. These jobs don't exist. They're fluff, they're fake, they're phony, and they're fraud. Yep, unbelievable, right? Now, we've had several economists on this program, including former Reagan White House economist, former Trump White House economist Steve Moore, I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where he said that, you know, these things constantly are being recreated, right, or revised, because they say it's this today and it's something else tomorrow. We've talked about that with Vance Ginn. We've talked about it, who was OMB Associate Director in the White House. We've talked about it with our resident economist, E.J. Antoni from Heritage. So what gives here? There's always a revision to these reports, but now, listen to this headline. U.S. economy created 818,000 fewer jobs than previously reported. Absolute insanity. Now, Gina Raimondo, the former governor, used to serve in the administration. She was asked by MSNBC at the Democrat National Convention what she thought about nearly 1 million jobs that don't exist. These jobs were fake, phony, and fraud added to the jobs report, and they're not real, so they were removed. That's like me saying, listen, I weighed in at 170 pounds at 6'1". Fake, phony, fraud, right? I'm 5'8", and I weigh 190 pounds. So my point is, when it isn't real, it isn't real. It doesn't exist. And they asked her this question. Listen to her response.
Do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No. When I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
She's not familiar with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. She's only a former governor who's worked in Washington as well. Unbelievable, right? She was the secretary of I forget what. Gina Raimondo. Just ridiculous. I don't believe it. If Trump said it, it's not Trump that's saying it. It's the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The story's been out there most of the day, and just crazy. I'll give you a little bit of this story because we're going to jump into this a little bit more in depth in a little bit. But just to give you a taste of this, the U.S. job growth during much of the past year was significantly weaker than it previously reported, according to new data published Wednesday. That's today. The Bureau of Labor Statistics revised down its total tally of jobs created in the year through March by 818,000 jobs as part of its preliminary annual benchmark review of payroll. Wow. This suggests that the economy added an average of 174,000 jobs per month during that time period, below the previous 242,000 estimate. On a monthly basis, that amounts to about 68,000 fewer jobs each month. That's an average. So they're saying they lied about 68,000 Americans having jobs, claiming that these jobs are part of this report when they in fact were not. Unbelievable. This is the largest downward revision since, guess when? Since Obama's big disastrous economic downturn in 2009, the Great Recession. Isn't that something? Unbelievable. Really, this one, I did not see this one coming. And guess what? You got 32,000 kids that are missing from the border. We'll get into that a little bit later. And where's Kamala? What has she had to say about any of this? I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard Kamala Harris, que mala eres. I haven't heard her say anything about these fake jobs that she's created with her buddy, Joe El Baboso Biden. I haven't heard say anything about these 32,000 missing kids. It's another report that just came out. I haven't heard anything. Yet, what's his name? Tiananmen Tim. Tiananmen Tim is going to be up on that stage in a little bit at the Democrat National Committee in Chicago. All smiles, throwing bombs against Trump, throwing bombs against people like you and me that believe in God, family, and country. He's going to be out there like the little angry chipmunk he is. Hat tip to somebody who told me that on Twitter. They sent me a picture of an angry chipmunk and Tim Walz, and they kind of did look alike. But Tiananmen Tim, right, with all his dubious China ties. And Slick Willie, right? B.J. Clinton, as the great one Mark Levin calls him. Bill Jefferson Clinton. He's up there on the stage, all smiles and giggles, cool as a cucumber. Not a mention about these 818,000 fake jobs, nearly 1 million jobs that don't exist. Even MSNBC is asking about that stuff. Funny how nobody's mentioning that at the Democrat National Convention tonight. Nobody. Nobody's saying anything. All they can talk about is Trump taking away your IVF, which isn't even real, right? Earlier, I saw a clip. It was a juxtaposition of Michelle Obama last night at the Democrat National Convention saying that Trump is coming after your IVF, women's ability to do in vitro fertilization if they're having trouble conceiving and starting a family, and saying this is Trump. Trump's coming after IVF. And then it juxtaposed a video of Trump actually stating his position on it. And the two couldn't be further apart. Listen to this.
Taking away our freedom to control our bodies, the freedom to become a mother through IVF like I did.
That's Michelle Obama. He's taken away your IVF at the DNC last night. Here's El Trompito.
We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby.
So there you go. More lies from the Democrats. And listen, I prefer to debate policy. I prefer to debate things that are debatable, right? A policy position, a position on a war even. But things like this that are clear as day. Trump's not doing that. He's just not. In reality, he doesn't have, in this particular moment, he has no ability to do anything even like that. But yet this is what they want to do because they're grasping for straws. And I guess it does frustrate me, just like it frustrates so many of you, that this is how they run their campaign. They lob a lie out into the general public, and they hope that you'll believe it. And then they go ahead and they set the attack dogs on there, the left within the media, the left within the party, and they go at it for a while, and then it's up to us to always be on defense saying, well, that's not true. No, here, listen to this. And as long as we're on defense, we're not on offense. And this is how they get ahead. That's why I like El Trompito, because he knows how to throw a punch. He's not just a good counterpuncher. He knows how to lob his own insults at these people, right? He knows how to throw bombs. And that's what you have to do with an enemy like this. And I say enemy because that is what they are, right? They are a political enemy. This is not just a difference of opinion, although it is. Ultimately, if you care about God, family, and country, those things are at stake. There's a target on them, literally. And they put that target on Donald Trump a month ago. What are we to do? He says, fight, fight, fight. I say, vote, vote, vote. Don't go anywhere. More to come straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Night, your home for the best election coverage.
What's your headband?
This is the headband for the military wing responsible for the resistance operations in Gaza.
Hamas?
Yeah.
Okay, do you support Hamas?
I do.
Why do you support Hamas?
So I would support any and all resistance operations that fight for the freedom of our country, for the freedom of Palestine.
Does that include October 7th?
Yes.
You support October 7th?
Yes.
Why?
Because it didn't start on October 7th. It started in 1948. October 7th is just a response to that.
But do you support the actions on October 7th?
What actions are you talking about specifically?
Like specifically the sieging of kibbutz and the murder of innocent civilians in their homes?
It was established and proven that the murder of innocent civilians was actually committed by the Israeli military.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
I've seen the body camera footage from Al-Qassam brigaders breaking into homes and murdering people.
They broke into military sites as well as homes, but it doesn't matter because...
But you support the breaking into the homes?
Yes.
Okay. At least we got an honest one here, right? That is a pro-Hamas protester in Chicago outside the DNC wearing a Hamas headband saying he supports Hamas, he supports October 7th. These are the people that are surrounding the United Airlines Arena in Chicago for the DNC. Absolute crazy town. I want to get some reaction to this and to what Walz is expected to talk about and everything else that's going on with this 2024 election from Elizabeth Pipko. She's a spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So when you hear this audio of a protester outside the DNC, pretty much unabashedly just saying, yeah, I support that. I support the military wing of the resistance in Gaza and X, Y, and Z and everything else he just said. How do you react to that?
Look, it's sad because I'm not surprised, but that's the problem, right? We should all be surprised that this is happening, and I'm not, because this is what I've witnessed for nearly 10 months now since October 7th. This is what I've seen plastered across social media, plastered across TV screens, what I've unfortunately had to respond to on media countless times now in the last 10 months, and what I've really seen a big problem with a lot of people having to disavow. I don't know if it's because they support this kind of language or if it's because things have gotten so politicized now that people truly believe disavowing these people might lose them an election, so it's not worth it for them. But when you hear people saying that they support a terrorist group raping and murdering innocent people, many of which, by the way, were Americans. No one talks about that. It wasn't just Israelis that were murdered October 7th. There was Americans as well, and it's Americans that are still right now being held by this terrorist group in Gaza in those horrible tunnels. So when I see that, when I hear that, knowing that it's happening in my country and knowing that there is not a massive effort to disavow that and to condemn that kind of language, it just proves how far we've fallen as a society and as a country, and how truly all our morals have gone out the window because politics has taken over our culture and our society, and it's the only thing that seems to matter to so many people now, to the point that they're letting actions and words like this slide.
Elizabeth Pipko, I agree with you. I think you're spot on. And while it doesn't surprise me, it is disappointing that I don't hear anything from Kamala Harris, who I like to call Kamala-nomics. I don't hear anything from Tiananmen Tim Walz. It seems like they're completely silent on the complicity of these quote-unquote protesters that support terrorism.
Right, and what's crazy is this is not a complicated issue, right? There's a lot you and I, I'm sure, can talk about. There's a lot of issues that we know are complicated, right? There's a lot of issues that are nuanced. Our politics has become so black and white, it actually makes certain issues difficult to discuss. This is not one of those issues. This is so basic, it's so obvious, it's so clear what the answer should be to these questions, to what happened on October 7th, to a group like Hamas, which wishes to do the same thing to Americans as they did in Israel on October 7th. And the fact that we have any confusion over how to respond to this shows that we've truly lost our way, right? It is such an easy thing to respond to. The fact that people are even having to ask the question of, what do you think of October 7th? To everyday Americans shows that we have completely lost our way. The fact that that's even being discussed shows that people have lost their minds. And the fact that the current leadership in the White House is not putting a strong effort into stopping this kind of rhetoric, into showing people that that's not the case, into inspiring people, as difficult as it might be right now, to just stand up for this country and against terrorism, I think that's a huge problem. Some things just mean more than politics and elections. I think this is one of them. Unfortunately, I don't think many people agree with that anymore.
I think you're right. And sadly, again, everybody is conspicuously silent on the issue. We're discussing the Democrat National Convention. It's a huge deal. It's a big thing that's going on. We're one of our major parties in our country is nominating their standard bearer to run for president. And even former President Clinton, just, 5-10 minutes ago, was on stage talking about how important this is, that he compares these elections to a job interview. So you have these candidates running for a job interview, but of these candidates, I only hear one of them talking about Israel. I only hear one of them talking about the Middle East and Hamas, and only one of them, in my opinion, has had any type of experience creating any type of peace through the Abraham Accords. And yet this is supposed to be a job interview. I want you to hear what President Clinton had to say.
It's the greatest job interview for the greatest job in the world. Secondly, the Constitution says we, the people, get to do the hiring. And the third thing is that every 4 years, we get to change the requirements for the job.
So there you have it. He himself is saying that this is a job interview, but yet Tim Walz, Kamala-nomics, and the rest of the clown show that is the Democrat Party, nobody has anything to say on anything outside of saying bad things about Donald Trump.
That's certainly true. Look, I think it's funny that we're talking about this as if it's a job interview. I hope people realize anyone listening right now has probably gone on a job interview and they've been interviewed. So that clearly is much more difficult than whatever Kamala Harris is doing, because she has yet to sit down for an interview when she's running for the most important job in the world. So I don't even know if it can be compared to a job interview at this point, because that's how ridiculous this truly is. The fact that she has not been able to speak to the American people, to sit down with a reporter since becoming the presumptive nominee, proves that that's not the case. But I want to remind people, you're talking about Bill Clinton here, who's speaking. He was president less than, 30 years ago, and look how much the party has changed. Look how difficult it is for people in the Democratic Party to stand with Israel, our ally. How difficult it is for them to condemn those burning American flags. This never would have happened under Bill Clinton. It never would have happened under Barack Obama, because this happened all before our eyes in the last 8 years since Donald Trump came into office, and people became so truly disenfranchised, so truly angry at their neighbors, their teachers, their friends, anyone who votes differently than them, so truly just divided. It's been absolutely horrible, and it's turned both parties in opposite directions against each other. And I think for Democrats to know that this is happening on their watch, it never would have happened just a few years ago. If you had told any Democrat 5, 6, 7 years ago that this would be going on, that they'd be burning American flags and protesting like this outside their convention, they probably wouldn't have believed you. And yet here we are, and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, Hillary, all these leaders.
I'm going to pause you right there. Folks, we're coming right back with Elizabeth Pipko. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our coverage of the Democrat National Convention in Chicago. We're live and national right now with our guest, Elizabeth Pipko, spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. And Oprah Winfrey has just taken the stage. Let's tap in and hear what she has to say.
When we stand together, it is impossible to conquer us. In the words of an extraordinary American, the late Congressman John Lewis, he said, no matter what ship our ancestors arrived on, we are all in the same boat now. Congressman Lewis knew very well how far this country has come, because he was one of the brilliant Americans who helped to get us where we are. But he also knew that the work is not done The work will never be done because freedom isn't free. America is an ongoing project. It requires commitment. It requires being open to the hard work and the heart work of democracy. And every now and then, it requires standing up to life's bullies.
And that's Oprah Winfrey standing up to the bullies at the DNC. I'm guessing she's making a reference to Trump and people like you and me. I want to come back to our guest, Elizabeth Pipko from the RNC. Elizabeth, when you hear Oprah Winfrey up there sounding like, giving a Stalin-esque kind of speech, in my opinion, what do you think of that?
I think it's sad. When she said bullies, I thought the same thing you did. She's talking about Donald Trump and all of his supporters. I don't consider myself or any of the people I've met who support Donald Trump to be bullies. I think it's sad because, A, she was obviously friends with them. It's a personal relationship I'm not going to comment on, but she and Donald Trump seemed to be very good friends before he decided to run for office as a Republican. But B, I think when you paint this former president, by the way, possibly future president, as a bully, you're lying to the American people, right? It's that simple. I would love for people to understand that if Donald Trump is ever a bully, he's a bully to our enemies, which is why he kept us safe for the 4 years that he was in office. There's a reason that he always repeats the phrase, peace through strength, because the best way to peace for Americans and for the world is through strength. So if Donald Trump is ever a bully, it's certainly just being a bully to the enemies that we have around the world. And unfortunately, too many people, my age and younger especially, don't realize that we do have many enemies around the world, and it sometimes takes a bully to keep America safe from all of those threats. I think it's really unfortunate that's the language that they're using, and I hope people understand that the language doesn't mean as much as the policies. The policies that kept us safe, and I would much have a bully in office like Donald Trump, again, to keep us safe, than someone who allows what happened in Afghanistan, for example, allows what happened in Israel on October 7th, and who allows anyone around the world to think that we are weak enough that they can take us on. So I would hope that most Americans realize that as well.
Yeah, folks, we're on with Elizabeth Pipko, spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, as we're taking in some of the live feed from the Democrat National Convention in Chicago. And, I just find it remarkable. I think Oprah Winfrey's an incredibly likable person on the national stage. I think she's a very powerful influencer. And I don't think she's really using her ability very well tonight, because she doesn't even sound like Oprah, right? She sounds like an angry politician. And she's there shaking her finger up on that stage. She hasn't cracked a joke. She hasn't smiled. She doesn't sound like Oprah. And I mean, I see some people in the crowd going crazy over this, but it's I guess it's when you're out of your element, when you're not doing what you do, hosting a talk show and whatnot, you come across as, for me, as somewhat partisan. And I guess that's fine. I'm a partisan, no biggie. But I don't know how much sway this is going to have with people. Do you think this is just an appeal to Democrats in the audience, or do you think by and large she's expecting to appeal to a larger swath of America?
It's interesting because I think when you pick these speakers, obviously what they're doing, much like what we had a focus on with our convention, it's about appealing to those in the middle, right? We obviously know that people are watching who are decided, but some people are watching that are still undecided, and that's how you go about picking these speakers and choosing what you're going to do, what your schedule is going to be for the few days of the convention. So I think in general, having someone like Oprah, who you're 100% right, is incredibly powerful, incredibly accomplished, and usually a great speaker, having someone like that could easily make people in the middle stop and think, hey, maybe I do want to vote for Kamala Harris. However, it's the rhetoric, right? That's the problem. Like you said, it's not about being inspirational and talking about everything Kamala Harris can do for the future. It's about tearing down Donald Trump and his supporters, which I just think truly both sides of the country are sick of. It doesn't help us move forward. It doesn't help us come together. And it's honestly not true. Painting the other side as a bully, painting the supporters of the other side in a negative light, which I think is even worse. It's been going on for 8 years now since Donald Trump announced that he was running for office. I think it only divides us further. And I think for someone like Oprah, you are 100% right. She could have and she should have come out and tried to inspire Americans to come together in this moment and to maybe tell us some of the good that she sees in Kamala Harris moving forward for this, this possible spot as president of the United States. But I think when you kind of don't have a lot of policies to fall back on, you end up just attacking the other side. I don't think it's helpful for them. I don't think it's helpful for the country. And the fact of the matter is a lot of what's brought up is simply not true. So it doesn't help any American who genuinely wants to make a good, informed decision and any American who wants to have a good relationship with those around the country who they disagree with, because they're stuck believing these horrible lies that make Donald Trump and his supporters out to be awful people. And it's the opposite, truly, of what I think we need right now.
Folks, we're on with Elizabeth Pipko, spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. And when we come back, a little bit more of our analysis on what's going on at the DNC tonight, live in Chicago, as well as some reaction to some of the other stuff we're hearing. For example, we've got some clip that I'm going to play for you of one of the union heads just going off the rails here about creating a darker workforce with more unionized labor. And again, if they want to be pro-labor, that's their job as a union boss. But the darker reference seemed to be a racial reference that it almost seems like it's okay to make racial references for some people, but not for others. And I want to get your reaction on that as well. Folks, we're coming right back with Elizabeth Pipko.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
She shares our vision for a modern-day labor movement, a movement that meets the needs of workers in the 21st century, and an economy that is ready for the future. It is going to be together that we write new rules to make it easier for all workers to join a union. And we are going to build a younger, darker, hipper, fresher, sneaker-wearing labor movement.
A sneaker-wearing labor movement. Listen, I love sneakers, including those fancy gold ones that Trump put out. But I want to know what this darker business is all about. I want to bring our guest back in, Elizabeth Pipko from the RNC. What do you think of this? This is, I think, a very interesting clip from April Verrett. She is the president of the Service Employees International Union. And she said this 2 nights ago at the DNC, and I still can't figure out what the reason for all this fervor was. What do you make of this?
You know, honestly, I don't know myself. It's interesting to me as I'm watching these last few days unfold. I'm always wondering, not what I'm thinking, because I obviously know where I stand, and I don't think they're trying to appeal to me, but I'm wondering what the average American is thinking when they're watching this, what's appealing to them and what's not. These are one of the moments where I sat and I wondered what would the average American think is being said here and if it appeals to them or not, because that's what matters, not what I think, what the American people think. That's why it's so great that we have the 2 conventions. There's a reason I want so badly for Kamala Harris to speak to the press. There's a reason I'm so looking forward to this debate, and I was a huge proponent of Donald Trump doing these debates. I always knew that he would, despite a lot of people wondering if that would be the case. I think transparency is always the option. It's always the number one thing that we should do. It's the goal. Right? The American people deserve that. They deserve answers, transparency, and being out there as much as possible. I believe the same thing about this convention, who these people chose to invite to speak for their convention, who this party wants on display, the words that they're uttering in front of millions of Americans. That's what they chose, just like we had our own convention a month ago, and we chose what we chose. And I want the American people to get that comparison between the 2 parties, between the 2 candidates, between the 2 promises for the future. This is a direct contrast, by the way. It's a very special election because you actually get a direct contrast between 4 years of Donald Trump and 4 years, obviously, with Joe Biden, but also Kamala Harris. You get a direct comparison of 2 back-to-back administrations. Right now we have a comparison of these 2 conventions. Soon we'll have this debate, and it's up to the American people really to see what they thought of those that were on the stage, everything that they said to them, their message, their promise for the future, and what they think is best for them. And I'm genuinely curious what they think, because sometimes I listen to a lot of these speakers and I wonder who could this possibly appeal to, because I feel so far apart from a lot of what's being said. So I'm curious to know myself what the American people think of everything that we've seen these last few days, and what they think of the promises that were made for the future, because that's what matters, right? It's the future of this country, which genuinely we all have to understand is completely on the line right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Elizabeth Pipko, earlier today, Gina Raimondo, former governor, commerce secretary, was on CNBC. She blamed corporations for high prices, and she had this back and forth with them. And she was asked about this jobs report with 818,000 jobs that were basically non-existent, nearly 1 million jobs. I want you to listen to this.
Do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No, when I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it, because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
She's not familiar with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. What do you make of this?
Look, this is my problem with what's going on, right? I tell people all the time, I am the spokeswoman for the RNC, but for some reason, I don't consider myself to be political. I believe this is the answer. This is the obvious choice for this election, for our country, and that's what I'm doing. I just want both sides to be honest. I just want the American people to get what they deserve, and this is not what they deserve, right? Sitting on live TV in front of millions of people during an incredibly important week in our country, when you know people are listening, and claiming that you've never heard of this report, claiming that anything that happens that's said to people that doesn't sound good must be out of the mouth of Donald Trump, who only lies all the time. This is campaign rhetoric. It's not honesty for the American people. And the fact is, this was how many fewer jobs than the government reported? Over 800,000? That's not a statistical error, right? That is a lie. That's fraud. And they owe it to the American people to tell them the truth. You can blame Donald Trump for what happened under his watch and his administration, but you cannot blame him for every mistake that you've made and every lie that you've told. And I would hope that people, whether they're on the left or the right, would agree with me that the American people deserve honesty. They deserve talking points that don't just further their campaign, but actually can further their own lives as the American people, because that's who's affected by all of this, right? Not us, but the average American who's listening to this and just wanting honest answers. And again, I would hope anyone left or right would agree with me on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. You want to contribute to the national conversation, and that's part of my goal on this program as well. I try to do the same thing, although I do throw bombs every now and again. That's part of what I do. But at the end of the day, people do have to make a decision, and you've got to give them something to work with. I want to thank you, Elizabeth Pipko, for your for staying up late and hanging out with us, and for your analysis and your insight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, amigos, more to come straight ahead. We're going to get to some of your calls and more, a couple of more funny clips that I've got for you. And then we're going to dive deep in this with a former White House economist who's going to give us the scoop on this 818,000 missing jobs. It's hard. It's a mouthful. Unbelievable. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
2 days ago, I turned 78, the oldest man in my family of 4 generations. And the only personal vanity I want to assert is I'm still younger than Donald Trump.
That was President Clinton. President Clinton just a little while ago at the DNC, just prior to Oprah Winfrey. And, of course, making a joke and doing what he does. And, again, another really good giver of speeches, right? Bill Clinton was known for his magnetic personality and ability to connect with the audience. And I think that he did. And honestly, I have to say, in watching the speech, I've had this theory. Maybe it's a tinfoil hat theory, but I really feel that in allowing Kamala Harris to be the front runner here, the nominee, for them to say she's going to be better than Biden, I think they sit in a room, right? A few people, a few pollsters, a few strategists like David Axelrod, those types, Ron Klain, who right now, both of those guys kind of serve a similar function, like senior advisor, chief of staff, and they don't agree on a lot of things. One was Obama's guy, the other one is Biden's guy. And I feel like they sit in a room and they go back and forth on, all right, so if we get rid of Biden because he did so badly in the debate, but it wasn't really that, right? They kind of engineered that. Biden does badly in everything. Like the other night at the speech here, he said women have electrical power, right? Which, again, he was trying to say electoral, but it was funny and it happened. And they usually, will ignore that and provide cover for him. But I think for the debate that he did with Trump, he did extraordinarily poorly, like more than usual. And because it was longer, it was a longer format. And I think he also, he didn't get the cover that he was used to receiving, right? He's accustomed to receiving a level of support that is way more robust. So when you look at this, at least from my perspective, I say they're not letting a good crisis go to waste, as Rahm Emanuel once said. So they hone in and they start with their campaign, calling their people in the media saying, no, we got to go in on this. Is he too old? Is he too old? Push the Republican talking points so that they can get what they want, which is to mitigate loss. They realize we're losing everything. We're going to lose the White House. We're going to lose down ballot. We're losing everything. So what do? We have to put somebody in who in their right mind wants to run. Nobody's going to want to run knowing they're going to lose. They're a sacrificial lamb. What do? I don't know. We offer somebody a chance as a perch, somebody who doesn't have a shot anyway and knows they don't have a shot. We tell them we're going to prop them up bigger than they've ever been propped up before if they do this for the team, do this for the party. Let's save some of these down ballot races so that we can hold on to the House. And hey, you never know. We actually might hold on to some of this. Hey, you never know. We actually might win this thing. So they go hard, right? Recreating truth, creating things out of thin air. Kamala's fantastic. Joy, this, that, and the other. And they're at this juncture. And I'm pretty sure the people that sat in this room with this imaginary conversation that I'm pretty positive never happened, but if it did happen, it would be the way I'm describing it. They get together and they're like, man, did you think we'd be doing this good? And then you got guys like Axelrod who came out the other day and said, look, if the election were held today, I don't know. Trump may very well win. And he's realistic. He understands this. So what happens? I think they might be doing a little better than they expected, but this doesn't last. Just look around when you're driving to work tomorrow. Are there a ton of cars around you? Not really. People are still on vacation. Once everybody's back on the road, the school buses are back, the reality hits, you're making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for your kids for lunch, and you see how much everything costs, people are going to not like what Kamala Harris stands for. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez, on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you live, hour number 2 on this Wednesday evening. And Our phone number, if you want to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. Of course, the Democrat National Committee's annual, or I should say quad-annual nomination convention is underway in Chicago. John Legend is on the stage right now tearing it up. We've got the jobs report revised down by 818,000 jobs. And I said earlier, I think this is the real big lie, right? Every time a jobs report comes out, there's always a commentary that, how many jobs is it really? Because they always revise them and they always revise it down. But this is probably the biggest revision we've seen in, 15 years or so. And that's a big deal. We haven't seen something like this since the Great Recession. And this is not good, especially at a time where you got Biden preemptively making preparations for nuclear war because of Iran and everything that's going on over there. And just a difficult time. By the way, just another quick ADHD headline. My congressman, Democrat Bill Pascrell Jr., has died at the age of 87 years old. We had his opponent on the show a while back, Billy Prempe. Maybe we'll get him back on to react to what's going on. I'm wondering who they'll put up and if they will fare well in that election. But my condolences to his family. And back to this 818,000 missing jobs, these fake, phony, fraudulent jobs. It's fluff. And Donald Trump, I think, said it best when he said this is fraud, right? They can't, you can't just go and adjust something for the year and say, oh, yeah, by the way, we messed up and this is another downward revision, 818,000 jobs that are missing. Just they don't exist. And everybody at the DNC is there with their pretty face. You got Tim Walz making his way to go and speak at the DNC eventually. And this is one of those things that is like, what is going on here? How much gaslighting can the American people withstand? And maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but when you just deny the facts, right? You got former Commerce Secretary, former Governor, Gina Raimondo. I played this clip twice already. I'm playing it again because I'm just, I'm not going to say shocked, but very disappointed to hear the way she reacts to this question. Listen to this.
Do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No, when I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. She's not familiar with the Bureau of Labor statistics, and she just doesn't believe that all these jobs magically disappeared. That's great. And she's the Commerce Secretary. Like, what is going on? Do they not have meetings or email threads where people know what's happening? I mean, she shouldn't be getting caught off guard like that at the DNC unless she's really inept and really bad at her job where she doesn't know what's going on. Anyway, bottom line here is this is a huge deal. And I think we need to understand how it happens, why it happens. Could there be any way that this is actually some sort of clerical error? Or is this the fraud that we think it is being perpetrated on the American people? I want to tap into a former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in the Trump administration, Dr. Tomas Philipson. He is a PhD economist, and he's our guest. Welcome back, sir.
Good to be with you.
So you hear this news, and what's the first thing that comes to mind here?
Well, I think BLS has a kind of a murky history of revising things a lot, but this is a big revision, like you said. It's about 5 times the size of the typical annual revision. There are annual revisions every year, essentially, but sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, but this is a huge revision. And the question is this lack of ability? Is it that COVID presented problems in labor market and measuring them that wasn't there before, and therefore it's difficult? Or is it just political bias where to try to make the economy look better than it is? Because it does show that, the labor market has slowed down a lot more faster than we have thought the last year, essentially. A little bit. This is stopped in March in 24, but So the labor market is softer than we thought, but it's been all this talk about the great labor market because we've been
That's my
adding jobs. Yeah, but I think that's been misguided to start with, because if you ask workers in the labor market, they don't certainly think it's a good labor market. And the reason is that people confuse prices and quantities in the labor market. So quantities in the labor market is how many people work, etc. And prices is the real wages. And real wages have gone down under Biden, as you know. So the workers are, not feeling it. And we're adding, sometimes we add maybe, in the last few jobs report, the last few months, maybe you add 160,000 jobs or something like that. Let's say you do that. But there's 160 million workers in the labor force, okay? And those guys are taking hits. Those guys are taking hits in their real wages. So the labor market, this claim that the labor market is great, even though real wages are not progressing or even declined for some people because of inflation, obviously, I think is very, very misleading. And it's confusing, quantities of labor, how many people work, how many people enter, etc., with the prices, meaning real wages, which have been destroyed essentially, particularly for the middle income and poor individuals, because of, the inflation of necessities such as food and gas, etc., has been much higher than average inflation, which has been about 20% since Biden started cumulative. So the poor has been really, really hit by inflation, because what they spend a larger share of their budget, obviously, on, let's say, food than Elon Musk does. If they spend about 20%, the really poor, on their budget on food. If Elon Musk did that, he would explode from eating, essentially. So, so the share of your budget that gets spent on food, the share of your budget that gets spent on gas, and the 1%ers don't even know what the gas price is, because it's such a small share of their budget was how much they spend on gas. But the poorer individuals have a much larger share of their budget spent on transportation in terms of gas. And they have really been hit by these high inflation industries under this recent inflation.
Folks, we're on with Dr. Tomas Philipson. He was the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in Trump's White House. And Tomas Philipson, I guess my follow-up question here is, with real wages having gone down in this administration, which again is not something that you're going to hear reported daily in the media, but it is a matter of fact, and it seems like every proposal she's putting forward with respect to the economy seems to be a gimmick around every area where she fell short. For example, this latest one is the cost of living plan. I feel that whether it's the socialist price controls that she's talking about, or the $25,000 for first-time home buyers, we have an inflation problem because of government spending, and her reaction to that is more government spending. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's very typical, actually. So the government spending has gone from roughly, government spending goes up because the economy becomes bigger, but it's grown faster than the economy. So government spending has gone from 20% of GDP, roughly, to 24% of the GDP as the size of the economy, right? So we're growing, the government is growing faster than the economy. There's three ways to finance that. You always pay a tax when you're trying to finance more spending. You can do it by raising taxes directly, which is the ones you send into IRS, and we're all familiar with. Then you can use it. You can pay taxes later if you borrow the money and spend more, essentially. It's just pushing the tax to the future. Sooner or later, you're going to have to pay back that debt. Or you can print more money and finance the spending that way, and then you pay an inflation tax, which is what, obviously, the borrowing and the monetization of that, meaning that the Fed, the printed money, essentially, to finance that borrowing, is what gave us the inflation. And that inflation tax, when they talk about not taxing people below 400,000, that has hit exactly the people below 400,000 the hardest, essentially. And so it's very, very misleading. Just because you're not sending in money to IRS doesn't mean you're not taxing people, as everyone has fully understood the last 3 years. Because they're being taxed with inflation instead of a IRS check that they have to send in. So I think there's a very common pattern of bad policies when you have inflation being generated which can only be generated by a government. You can have increases in certain industries, in prices in certain industries, right? So because demand outstrips supply. But inflation, by definition, is economy-wide price increases. That can only be generated by the government. It can't be generated by the private sector. And a common response to that, by misguided, policies, is to then respond to that government failure with another government failure, which is price control. And they proposed it on drugs. They implemented it on drugs. They proposed it on rent. They have proposed it now on food, essentially, big ticket items where they're trying to fight inflation with price controls. Obviously, we had that experience in the U.S. with Nixon doing the same thing, and it was abolished in 3 months later, essentially. But it's also the experience in more socialist countries such as Venezuela and Soviet Union. We had these breadlines. And when they imposed price controls to fight inflation, because the government essentially generated inflation from massive government spending.
Folks, we're on with Dr. Tomas Philipson, former chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. And when we come back, I want to get his take on Harris's economic ideas to raise the corporate tax, the tax rate to 28% from the current rate, which is 21%. And, of course, a little bit of expounding on what you talked about with price gouging in the food sector. So we're going to get into that and more when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
First of all, I haven't heard Vice President Harris talk about price controls. She's talked about making sure that there's no price gouging that takes place so that we have a properly functioning market where consumers have the ability to purchase the goods that they need at a fair market-based price without any unlawful activity that occurs. This should not be a controversial thing.
That is Hakeem Jeffries saying he's never heard about this plan for socialist price controls, but Kamala Harris continues with these proposals. And one of her economic proposals that she just put out is likely going to draw some criticism from economists and business groups. That's according to a piece in the Financial Times, where she's talking about raising the corporate tax rate to 28%, a federal ban on price gouging in the food sector, plus a big effort to boost the housing supply and some tax breaks for families with children, which is also good. I think the tax breaks I love. Whether it's a gimmick or not remains to be seen. But we're going to get to the bottom of that with our guest, Dr. Tomas Philipson, former chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. What do you think about these plans of hers, sir?
Well, coming back to the price gouging, I think, that's very misleading. Who determines what's price gouging, et cetera? But it's a very misguided view that the companies are responsible for this inflation, which is basically what it boils down to.
Right.
You look at, Senator Warren and others, how they tweet. I mean, the companies they're responding to their costs going up of both labor, but also capital and other things and producing things. And if they don't raise prices, they go bankrupt, essentially. So they have to push those prices on. Also, these industries they claim there's price gouging in are highly competitive industries And so if you raise your price and the competitor doesn't, you lose your business, essentially. So, you can't have this take place in a highly competitive industry that somehow all these competitive industries are colluding and raising prices above cost with big margins, essentially. And, even shrinkflation, which they made a big deal out of, is a very natural response for companies. When the costs of making what they make go up, they can either raise price accordingly, or they can cut the quality, and that is to say the size of the package or something, and keep the price the same. Those are the only two options, essentially. And a lot of them have gone for the latter, which makes a lot of sense. If people don't tolerate higher prices, they just cut quality at the same price. So the quality-adjusted price, if you want to think of it, goes up, but it goes up because the size of the package goes down as opposed to the price of the packages going up. So I think, shrinkflation probably sells. That's what store managers have figured out, or the company manufacturers have probably figured out, that they sell more when the package is smaller at the same price as opposed to raising the price of the same size package. So it's a very natural response to cost pressures when you and how much it costs for you to make things. And no economists think, unless you have a Democratic axe to grind, no economists believe that rent controls and all this, food price controls, et cetera, which they're talking about, are useful policies. There's almost universal agreement on that. There are a lot of price controls in disguise in the economy. Obviously, all of healthcare has Medicare pricing and Medicaid pricing. Right. They're setting prices for doctors. They're setting prices for hospitals.
But it is, in effect, destroying their industry.
Yeah, no, exactly. It leads to huge distortions, on the government's basically telling the industries what they should be focusing on. You see that when reimbursement rates go up in one field versus another for hospitals, they rearrange the hospitals to take advantage of the new government rates that are being paid, et cetera. There's also in credit markets, the Fed is really a rent control institution because they set the cost of renting capital, which is what the interest rate is, essentially. They set the cost of, how much does it cost to get capital from some person and then pay them back. They're what economists almost think of as renting capital. So there's a lot of price controls already in the economy. Guys,
Doc,
and we don't.
I don't want to interrupt you, but they're gonna kick us both off the air. So I want to thank you for your time and for joining us. I really appreciate it, Dr. Tomas Philipson. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, folks, we continue the discussion straight ahead on socialist price controls and more when we return. Don't go anywhere.
Liberty-loving Latino.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Familia, we continue our discussion tonight. We've got live coverage of the Democrat National Committee annual convention, or I should say quadrannual. I don't know how to say that word. Every 4 years. Anyway, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, just took the stage moments ago. Let's tap in and see what he's got to say.
And we know if these guys get back in the White House, they'll start jacking up the costs on the middle class. They'll repeal the Affordable Care Act. They'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And they will ban abortion across this country with or without Congress.
And that's Governor Tim Walz again saying Republicans are going to take everybody to town on Medicare and destroy your health care. And this is the fear-mongering that they use. Bernie Sanders was no different when he was on MSNBC recently, saying that Kamala Harris laid out a very strong progressive agenda that includes socialist price controls on prescription drugs. Listen to this.
Let me tell you what a radical agenda is. And that is Trump's Project 2025. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, giving
And
more
while he's
tax
talking about
dollars
wealth inequality, I'm talking about health inequality, because Bernie Sanders, again, doubling down on this Kamala Harris plan for prescription drugs. And he says it's enormously popular and it's the right thing to do. Let me check with the control room and see if we have that. All right, listen to this.
I think what she laid out today was a strong progressive agenda, obviously, in the weeks and months to come. I think she's going to add more specificity to some of these proposals, and she's going to add to it. But, Chris, I have always believed that good policy is good politics. And what she is talking about today is reining in the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs. That's enormously popular, the right thing to do. She's talking about building 3 million units of affordable housing at a time when we have a housing crisis in Burlington, Vermont, Los Angeles, California, and every place in between.
So that's Bernie Sanders again on MSNBC just on Friday. And he says that this is good politics because we have to lower the cost. Now, listen, I'm not against lowering the cost of anything. I'm just in favor of the market deciding these things. And I get it. We don't want to make medicine difficult for people to get, especially things that people need. If I can get something for $25, I'd rather pay $25 than pay $280, right? And I know a lot of people, whether it's diabetes medication or any type of medication, they face these problems. So these are real issues. But I want to get to the bottom of it. So I want to bring in our guest, Dean Clancy, Senior Policy Fellow with Americans for Prosperity. Dean Clancy, welcome.
It's good to be here.
So you've heard the tape. You've heard Tim Walz attacking Republicans on their alleged destruction of Medicare. You've heard Bernie Sanders saying it's the best politics and the best policy to implement these price controls. What say you?
Well, price controls never work. And it's kind of ironic. Tim Walz said if the Republicans get back in, they're going to drive up costs for the middle class. Well, I got news for you. That's kind of what's been happening under the current administration. Mm-hmm. And it is kind of funny to hear Vice President Harris, who cast the deciding vote in the U.S. Senate for the policies that have driven up the cost of living for millions of Americans, say, well, I'm going to go after the companies that are greedy, and we're going to fix this problem. And it's like, wait a minute, who caused the problem? She's shocked at the high cost of living. And the prescription drugs, of course, is just part of this. And she has celebrated the idea of price controls on prescription drugs. They had an event at the White House recently. Vice President Harris was there and interim President Biden, and they were all celebrating the fact that they negotiated with the drug companies to bring down the price of drugs in Medicare. They passed the legislation that gave them that so-called negotiating power, but what it really was price dictation, price controls. And it turns out that they didn't actually save much money, so apparently they didn't use the incredible leverage they gave themselves. But throughout history, we find that the result of price controls is scarcity. You basically get less of it, shortages, black markets, and then when you lift the price controls, prices shoot up. You actually are worse off for a time. And it goes back to Hammurabi and the Emperor Diocletian, Richard Nixon. It's been tried over and over. It never works. Price controls hurt people. They're not the right way to go.
Folks, we continue our conversation on price controls and more with Dean Clancy, Senior Policy Fellow with Americans for Prosperity. We're going to get into that straight ahead. Plus, if you want to join the conversation, feel free. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 5337 833 4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
You have experience and skills in interviewing, or you wouldn't be on your program.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Why are prescription drugs so expensive? I will tell you. Well, one big reason is for years, Big Pharma has often inflated the price of life-saving medications, charging many times what it would cost to make just to increase their profits. And millions of Americans have suffered as a result. My entire career, I've worked to hold bad actors accountable and lower the cost of prescription drugs. As Attorney General of California, I took on pharmaceutical companies for deceptive marketing and illegally inflating the cost of drugs, and we won billions of dollars. As a United States Senator, I fought to pass laws that would make health care more affordable and accessible for all Americans.
And folks, we're back with Dean Clancy from Americans for Prosperity. And Dean, when you hear Vice President Kamala Harris, who I like to call Que Mala Eres, talk about this prescription drug scheme, it kind of goes back to what you were saying, no?
Yeah, she is basically blaming the drug companies for the high cost of prescription drugs. She doesn't mention that government policies enable them to basically prolong their patent monopolies, to game the system, and the price controls that she supports to try to force the prices down actually have a very negative effect on the development of new cures in the future. She's killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. We know this is happening. There's been like 24 major drug research projects, promising cancer drugs, Alzheimer's drugs, that have been shut down by the drug companies, not because they're greedy, but because they realize now with these government price controls, it's too risky. They can't afford to put billions of dollars into research on these things and be sure of getting some kind of return at the end that covers their costs. And so basically in the future, you're going to see fewer new cures and therapies developed. And economists all agree on this. They only disagree about, how much of a negative impact these price controls will have on innovation. And but you don't hear that from her. What you hear is that the evil drug companies are just charging too much, as if they had, total freedom to do that. In a truly free market, they can't do that. They have to compete and prices come down. We don't have a truly free market now, and that's why we have problems. But the solution is not more government or price controls. The solution is more competition, and that'll bring the prices down.
Now, Dean Clancy, I agree with you. I think the free market approach is always the best approach. I don't believe that we'll get that from this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, or from any future Harris administration. How do you make the sale on this idea of the free market with, 70 some odd days to go to Election Day, and her telling seniors all across America, I'm going to make prescription drugs more affordable for you, or go with the evil, the bad men in the Republican Party who are going to, rake you over the coals?
Well, it's true that a simple story like, I'll just force the price down through government price controls. That's very appealing to people who don't have time to really think about the question. But I hope people will actually look at the record and realize, wait a minute, prices have shot through the roof because of the policies of the same people who now claim they're going to go out and solve it. A month ago, people were saying the Biden economy is great. Now Harris is saying, I'm going to fix the economy. And same thing with the price of prescription drugs. And people do have to be reminded that this has been tried before and it has not worked. And people also have to be reminded that, look, if we want to have those cures in the future, we can't be cutting the profits of the drug companies just, willy-nilly now, because it's going to have an effect. There's no free lunch, and we have to let innovation take place. It's very risky and very expensive, and when you monkey with it, you're sawing off the limb that you are sitting on. I hope people will listen to that. If nothing else, they should look at the record of the candidates, because that will tell you a lot about what would likely happen if they got elected.
And folks, we are on with Dean Clancy from Americans for Prosperity. When we come back, we're going to wrap up our conversation, and plus any calls. If you have a question for Dean Clancy, happy to put you through to him. You got the number. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We continue our conversation with Dean Clancy from Americans for Prosperity. And if you have a question related to healthcare and these price controls that we're talking about on prescription drugs, feel free to give Dean a call. He's here with us for a couple more minutes, 833-482-5337. I know there's a couple of you on hold with questions other than healthcare. We'll get to those once we're done with Dean Clancy. And I want to give Dean Clancy an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what he does with Americans for Prosperity and how what you all do, Dean, helps the American people.
Well, thank you. Americans for Prosperity is a national grassroots advocacy organization, basically trying to remove barriers between you and the American dream. We believe in an open society of mutual benefit where people cooperate voluntarily to help each other. And we find that a lot of the barriers to that are government and regulatory barriers, high taxes, and misguided policies. We basically believe in people. We think that markets work and the world can be better. And what I do for AFP is analyze public policy, including healthcare, and try to promote what we call a personal option approach, which is basically empowering consumers, fund patients, not insurance companies, remove regulatory barriers like some of the rules in Obamacare and so on, which are driving up the cost of healthcare, making it hard to find a doctor and see the medical professionals you trust.
And of course, that's always a barrier to things, right? I was listening to someone earlier today that said, I used to be a Democrat, and I loved that Barack Obama was putting out the Affordable Care Act, but he was fighting cancer at the time, and he said, when he said, I can keep my doctor, I loved it. He said, as soon as the thing came in, I couldn't keep my doctor, I couldn't keep my plan, and I was screwed. And it really impacted his coverage and his treatment, his recovery. And I think that happened to a lot of people, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. And people, I think, focus on kind of like what you said, you're sawing off the limb you're sitting on. And that is a dangerous scenario to be in, honestly. Now, Dean Clancy, for those that are on the fence thinking, I want to consider this proposal from Kamala Harris because I think affordable prescriptions are important. This is something that matters to me, matters to the elderly people in my family. What's your best word of advice to them?
Well, you should basically try to vote for people who are not going to just give you the easy story about, oh, I'll fix it with more government. Try to vote for people who basically have some understanding of how the economics works and who are going to take on the drug companies, but not through more government, but through more competition. And if you do it that way, you'll get the lower prices, but you'll also get more innovation and higher quality. And so, listen, if they start talking about price controls, it's a good bet that they don't really understand what has made American healthcare, for all its problems, one of the best healthcare systems ever. And therefore, you shouldn't trust those folks with your vote.
Yeah, I agree with that. Folks, again, we're on with Dean Clancy. And, Dean, I want to thank you for being here. I just want to double-check. There's a few people that are on the line. I want to make sure. I think there might have been. Was there one person that had a comment on this healthcare issue? On price gouging? I see. It's about OPEC. Got it. All right, we'll hold that over for the next segment. But Dean Clancy, I want to thank you for being here, brother. Let everybody know how to reach you and Americans for Prosperity.
Well, you can, see what I'm saying publicly at Twitter. I'm at Dean Clancy. You can also learn more about Americans for Prosperity and the personal option by visiting americansforprosperity.org or our special healthcare website, personaloption.com.
Outstanding. Dean, I want to thank you for being here. Thanks for staying up late with us. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. Godspeed. All right, we continue. Let's go to Dorian in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on KDKA. You wanted to say something about the Democrat National Committee. Go right ahead.
Well, essentially, I don't believe that I'm a lay person, and I'm reasonably alert, and my brain hasn't deteriorated, and I think the chaos is deliberate. All right, it comes down to it. They want disharmony. They want us to believe that we're naive. We're not, and I don't know the solution. I don't know why I'm considered that way, and I don't think I don't have a disregard for anyone in politics. It's a rough game, but how can they be completely divorced from reality of economics? It puzzles me.
Right. Well, I think this is why I try my best. Look, I look at their policies and their agenda as an enemy of what I believe America should be, an enemy of the American dream. But I don't look at the Democrats individually as enemies of mine. And I know there's people that do, but I don't. And just like you say, they're divorced from reality. Their reality's different because they believe in relativism and they think they can create their own truth. They think that they can rewrite history and reinvent the wheel. And in many cases, they do. And that's why they think that way. Dorian, thanks for your call. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Folks, Open Phone America's coming up right now. 833-4-VALDEZ. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. It's hour number 3, Wednesday night. We're live covering the Democrat National Convention. Tim Walz has accepted the Democrat nomination for Vice President of the United States. We've got other news as well. Kamala Harris continues to stand up for what she believes is right, which is socialist price controls and more government spending, more printing of money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We also have the huge story of the day, the biggest one, 818,000 jobs. That's just under a million. Fake, phony, fraud jobs. Fluff. They don't exist. They were adjusted downwards, revised on the latest jobs report, the annual revision. Nearly a million fake, phony jobs. This is close to 70,000, or about 68,000 jobs a month if you figure out on an average, that just did not exist. Just added for fluff to make reports look good in some months. And again, it doesn't really, that's the average, 68,000 a month. But that could be, 3 months where we pad with, 210,000. Who knows where all the padding was going. But clearly they've removed the padding today, and the number's off by almost a million jobs that were not created. Meanwhile, they're out there saying, we created this many jobs. Kamala-nomics, Bidenomics, this stuff works. We did it, Joe, right? Unbelievable. Fake, phony, and fraud. Anyway, Tim Walz. Tim Walz was out there at the Democrat National Convention giving his speech, his acceptance speech. And, of course, he went on a red meat tirade, beating up El Trompito and all lovers of liberty. And they're doing it, all of them. And I say they because it was Tim Walz, it was Bill Clinton, it was Oprah Winfrey, it was Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. You would have thought you were at the Republican National Committee's nomination convention. Why? Because they were talking about freedom. Freedom and the Constitution. Listen to Tiananmen Tim Walz.
I'm letting you in on how we started a family, because this is a big part about what this election is about. Freedom. When Republicans use the word freedom, they mean that the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. Corporations, free to pollute your air and water. And banks, free to take advantage of customers. But when we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love. Freedom to make your own health care decisions. And yeah, your kids' freedom to go to school without worrying about being shot dead in the hall.
Your kids' freedom to be able to go to school and not get shot dead in the hall. Find me a kid in America today that does not have that right. The right to life. Right? That's what he's talking about, right? The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is one's right to live. Tim Walz is standing up for one's right to live. Maybe he won't do it for the unborn, but he's doing it for everybody's kids' right to be able to go to school without getting shot up. As if a Republican administration, any, let alone Donald Trump's, would mean the exact opposite. Right? Most people are going to take that takeaway and say, oh my gosh, if I don't vote for you, I get the other guy, and the other guy's going to allow my kids to get shot up in schools? I mean, last I checked, it was the Republicans that were saying, why don't we let teachers carry on the school campus so that if something goes down and they're trained, they can react, and they're already there. They're the first responder on the scene. Right? It wasn't the Democrats that proposed that during the Uvalde massacre. That was the last time I remember that being brought up. But it's been brought up plenty of times. Sandy Hook. The one in Florida, I'm forgetting the name, near Coral Springs. Parkland, right? So I look at that and I think, this guy's full of it. And honestly, even though he's using this as rhetoric to fire up his crowd, and he's inverting things here, he's really making a similar case to what Isaiah Berlin made, right, on his Two Concepts of Liberty lecture back in 1958. But I want to underscore this with yet one more clip of audio from Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. Listen to this.
Kamala Harris, well, she has spent her entire career making progress. Donald Trump, a man with no guardrails, wants to take away our rights and our freedoms. And listen, while he cloaks himself in the blanket of freedom, what he's offering isn't freedom at all.
Now, he says Donald Trump wants to take away your rights and your freedoms. What right and freedom does Donald Trump want to take away? I listen to this stuff every day, and I usually understand what the Democrats are talking about. But honestly, this one's escaping me. Go ahead.
Because hear me on this. It's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. No, it's not. And it's not freedom to tell women what they can do with their bodies. And hear me on this, it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he gets to pick the winner. That's not freedom.
Now, I don't remember that happening either. I can't remember. They're saying that Trump is going into your doctor's office and telling women what they can do and what they can't do with their bodies. I think Trump said, I am the chief executive of the federal government, the Supreme Court of the United States, which is, within the federal government, has heard and reheard the Roe v. Wade case and came up with a decision. And this is going back to the states. So guys like Josh Shapiro can tell you what you can do and can't do with your body. Not Trump. Yet they want to put it on him. And I find it just amazing. I really do. The same people that were forcing you to wear a mask are telling you you should be able to have an abortion. And again, it doesn't really matter which side of the fence you're on this issue. It just matters, do you stand for what you stand for or not? If you believe that women should be able to have an abortion up to 3 months or up to 9 months or somewhere in between, and you say, you know what, that's their body, that's their choice, fine. Then let's use that same energy and say, you know what, if you don't want to get this vaccine, it's your body, it's your choice. You don't want to put on a mask, it's your body, it's your choice. Especially when we know that the vaccine didn't stop the spread. It was just helping oneself to not get as sick, right? That was the latest thing that they said. Then afterwards, they were like, oh, you don't get as sick with COVID, but you can get as sick with myocarditis and all sorts of sudden death that we've been seeing all over the world, right? All over the world, people have been dropping dead in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Young people in their 20s with myocarditis and other ailments, some temporary, some longer term. But there was no my body, my choice there. These guys want to talk about freedom, right? And I think that what they're really talking about is liberty. And again, going back to the Berlin lecture from 1958, Two Concepts of Liberty, he makes the case of these two concepts, negative liberty and positive liberty. And if you've ever listened to the great one, Mark Levin, he talks about this often. And that's actually where I heard it. And then I read the lecture. And I have to say, it's a very fascinating juxtaposition between the two, because Berlin argues that it's not necessarily a conflation of the two, that negative liberty is the same as positive liberty, right? Negative liberty being the freedom from the government, right? Freedom from interference and coercion and restraint, while positive liberty meant one's own freedom to self-determination, their freedom to act or be as one wills, and how those are trade-offs that you make. And in effect, that is what he argues. And what I'll do is maybe I'll read you a quick passage of that just so you get a good understanding of it. And then you could see how both Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz are so off their rocker here. They really just don't get it. And then you throw in a little Oprah talking about the Constitution. It was music to my ears. Anyway, I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5500. 833-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Let us choose loyalty to the Constitution over loyalty to any individual. Because that's the best of America. And let us choose optimism over cynicism, because that's the best of America. And let us choose inclusion over retribution. Let us choose common sense over nonsense. Because that's the best of America. And let us choose the sweet promise of tomorrow over the bitter return to yesterday. We won't go back. We won't be set back, pushed back, bullied back, kicked back. We're not going back.
And that, of course, is the voice of talk show host extraordinaire and media conglomerate magnate Oprah Winfrey. And what comes to mind is we hold Oprah to be self-evident, talking about the Constitution. It warms my heart, and honestly, just because I didn't like the tone she delivered it in or the context, I agree with every word she said. I really do. I think we should be beholden to our Constitution. We should be beholden to the bigger ideas, not people or whatever she said, personalities and whatnot. I think that's accurate. And in this case, I think it speaks more to Kamala Harris, que mala eres, how bad she is. It speaks more to her than it does Donald Trump. Because in all actuality, it's Kamala Harris that has, I think, the more reckless approach here. Trump already has a record to stand on. He's been there. We already know what we get. You can take all the hyperbolic rhetoric and, oh, he was this, he was threat to democracy, whatever. Just take it all and then just go to your bottom line. How did the economy fare with Trump in its entirety? From the minute he took his oath of office to his second impeachment after he was out of office already. But for COVID, the economy was fantastic. And if you compare, right, we'll be fair. We'll compare the active part of COVID, right, where there was lockdowns. You remove that from Biden and Harris, and you remove that from Trump and Pence. They still fare better. The economy still did better. Just because there was a rapid rebound, thank God for it, because the economy was so strong during Trump's administration, doesn't mean we made it back to where we were, right? Because we never did. It was Putin's fault. It was inflation was transitory. All of that being said, Trump managed to keep inflation at a very, very low level, 1.25 to 1.4. It was the biggest fluctuation I saw. So that's that. So you look at that. If that's the one metric you want to use, inflation, no problem. If you want to move on, look at the border. Same thing. You had two presidents, two administrations. Harris was there. She was the border czar even. Trump was able to lock that thing down at the height of that pandemic. The transition happened in January. They come in 21. COVID is still very active. And what happens? It only gets worse. And they start opening up the border and shutting down drilling and doing all sorts of things that were just not productive for the United States. So whether it's Shapiro talking about liberty, whether it's Oprah talking about the Constitution, whether it's Tim Walz talking about all the freedoms that he did. The reality is we were a freer people, a freer country with more opportunity and more liberty to our self-determination, to act or be as we will, right? That's the definition of liberty. And under them, there was more coercion, more restraint, more interference from the government. And that's exactly it. And, this is not a new problem. This is a problem that goes back, forever. Right? I'm trying to see if I find this here. From Isaiah Berlin's Two Concepts of Liberty essay, a lecture that he gave back in 1958 and then wrote about it in 69. Listen to this. I'm not going to read all of it, but it's very interesting. This is why those who put their faith in some immense world-transforming phenomenon, like the final triumph of reason or the proletarian revolution, must believe that all political and moral problems can thereby be turned into technological ones. That is the meaning of St. Simon's famous phrase about replacing the government of persons by the administration of things, and the Marxist prophecies about the withering away of the state and the beginning of the true history of humanity. This outlook is called utopian by those for whom speculation about this condition of perfect social harmony is the play of idle fancy. Nevertheless, a visitor from Mars to any British or American university today, and he's talking about in the 50s and 60s, might perhaps be forgiven if he sustained the impression that its members lived in something very like this innocent and idyllic state. For all the serious attention that is paid to fundamental problems of politics by professional philosophers. Yet, this is both surprising and dangerous. Surprising because there has perhaps been no time in modern history where so large a number of humans, both in the East and the West, have had their notions and indeed their lives so deeply altered, in some cases violently upset, by fanatically held social and political doctrines. Dangerous because when ideas are neglected by those who ought to attend to them, that's to say, those who've been trained to think critically about ideas, they sometimes acquire an unchecked momentum for an irresistible power over multitudes of men that may grow too violent to be affected by rational criticism. This applies to whomever you want to apply it to. I'm going to apply it to the wackos at the DNC who literally say one thing and do the exact opposite. Folks, we're coming to your calls straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
America at Night, your home for the best election coverage. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Before we begin, I want to address the massive scandal around the revised job numbers that were just announced this morning, a little while ago, just before I came up, I got to see them. And it really isn't a revision. It's a total lie. Total lie. There's never been any revision like this. They wanted it to come out after the election, but somehow it got leaked. It got leaked. Government leaks too. The Harris-Biden administration has been caught fraudulently manipulating job statistics to hide the true extent of the economic ruin that they've inflicted on America. The new data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the administration padded the numbers with an extra, listen to this one, 818,000 jobs that don't exist. So they said they existed, and they never did exist. They built them up so that they could say what a wonderful job they're doing. No, we've never had numbers like this.
We've never had numbers like this. Matter of fact, we haven't seen a revision like that since 2009, the Great Recession during Obama's administration. Trump is right. That was Trump. El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, El Presidente, in Asheboro, North Carolina today. explaining that the Biden-Harris administration got caught manipulating job numbers with fake, phony, fraud, fluff job numbers. And I can't argue it. This seems fraudulent. It really does. How do you make that big of a mistake? One that hasn't been made like that in 15 years? Conveniently, when you're running for re-election and the cornerstone of your economic program has been, look, the economy's stable. We've had unusually high job growth. Yeah, unusually high because it was fake. And now we know for over a year, it's been fake. They've been manipulating this since the beginning of the year. This is not cool. I've had economist after economist on saying, well, giving them credit, saying, well, to be fair, the job market is better than expected and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't. It was fake. It was phony. It was fraud. And they've been caught today. And Trump alludes to that. Likely it was somebody, a patriotic person within the Bureau of Labor Statistics that leaked this. I don't know how accurate that is, but makes a lot of sense to me because I wouldn't want to put this out. If I had to pick a time, I would pick the middle of August because that's when the least amount of people are paying attention and most people are on vacation and thinking about going back to school and all that stuff. So it's a great time for things to go unnoticed, especially if you do it Friday at 5 p.m. You're guaranteed that very few people are going to hear what you said. But ultimately, wow, this really shows how desperate these people really are, in my opinion. Let's go to Sven, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, WOND. Sven, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I turned off the DNC debacle. I couldn't watch it, but I did see part of it, and I couldn't believe that they actually went back to January 6th. But what was even worse was I can't believe they used AI-generated video to make it look like that the people there, the MAGA people, were being violent and attacking police. We know none of that ever happened.
Well, I didn't see anything like that. I was watching the DNC, and I didn't see any AI-generated images of anything like that. So I think we're on different pages here, Sven. But thanks for the call. We'll look into it and see if I can corroborate what you're talking about. Let's go to Eduardo, Tampa, Florida, streaming the show, richvaldez.com. Let's go and check in with him. Go right ahead.
Yeah, Rich. And a couple of the stories related to fraud with the or bad news on the economic front is the FBI is investigating $1.6 billion in fraud. And Mrs. Harris reported $80 million of her income. Did you hear about that, too? This is something that the Trump administration can run commercials on going into the election. I think this is very important that they can really score points on voters in this upcoming election. What do you think?
I guess. I don't know what you're talking about, so I really couldn't really comment on that. What are your thoughts on these job numbers?
Oh, I always suspected that this was the case. There's people that are working multiple jobs, just to make ends meet. So this is nothing surprising to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. I think that this is it's not surprising, but it is disappointing for sure to think that there's that high of a number. This isn't a little bit of a downward revision. This is a huge amount of jobs that it seems like there was some fluff. They wanted to do it under the cover of night when nobody was looking and hopefully get away with it. And I don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, Eduardo, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. Listening from Tampa, Florida. Let us continue. Where do we go? JW in Dothan, Alabama, WDBT. I understand you want to talk about price gouging. Is that correct?
Price
gouging?
I want to talk about it. Yes, I said.
Go right ahead. I'm doing great, brother. Muy bien.
Good. Oh, look, I have seen Kamala point her fingers at pharmaceuticals, groceries, price gouging, same profits, whatever. But the one I don't see her pointing at is her comrades in the Middle East and Venezuela controlling the prices of oil on a whim or when they want to. to the consumers of the United States, and we are going to be used to boasting the world, and she's not saying anything about that. And we all know this is at the roots of this inflation that they have created. And I'll take your answer off the air, Rich. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm not sure I got. Don't hang up just yet. You're saying that it is the Saudis and those that are producing oil that are price gouging. Is that right?
Yes, I haven't heard her say anything about, well, we need to control the price of this crude oil and the products coming off of it. Y'all raise the price when you want to on a whim. We think the barrel of oil all be this. I know they say it's world control, but come on, man.
Right. No, yeah, you're right. And honestly, that is the function of OPEC in many ways. But you're right. You won't hear them talk about that. When they do, they always do it against the market, right? Against anything that represents the free market, the idea of a free market. For example, I remember when gas was going up quite a bit, and it was like $5 a gallon. What were Kamala and Joe El Baboso saying? JW, they were saying this is local gasoline station owners that are price gouging. This is Exxon making windfall profits. They're making profits and they're laughing their way to the bank, right? That's what they were saying. And again, vilifying the corporations, vilifying everybody they could, never taking responsibility themselves, realizing that, you know what? If these people were going to price gouge, don't you think they could have done it forever and always? Why did they wait until you were in office, Joe Biden, to do the price gouging? Why? What was the purpose of this? They knew you were a big enough sucker where they'd get away with it? I don't think that's the case. I think the reality was their costs went up because Joe Biden's volatile policies on foreign affairs made everything so precarious from Europe to the Middle East. You combine that with the supply chain disruptions that we had because of COVID, along with the massive spending that triggered all of this inflation, and voila, you've got everything under the sun costing more. And it's that simple. So, yeah, they're never going to come out against anything that would make them look bad, where they would have control. This is all Trump's fault. It's your fault for driving an SUV. How dare you have a combustion engine? This is all the fault of you, the people, not we, the government. And that, JW, is the problem I have with them. Thank you for your call. Excellent point. Folks, we're going to pause right here, come back to your calls from Oregon, Montana, Idaho, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
You're going to have a hard time believing this, but so help me, I triple-checked it. Since the end of the Cold War in 1989, America has created about 51 million new jobs. I swear I checked this 3 times. Even I couldn't believe it. What's the score? Democrats 50, Republicans 1.
That, of course, is Bill Clinton trying to offset some of the news over 818,000 fake, phony fraud jobs that were reported in the Bidenomics, Kamala-nomics jobs report, right? Now, what's interesting is I'll take him up on this offer, right? He wants to create a false equivalency. I can do that too. Because if you look at the last 16 years, 12 of the last 16 years have had Democrats in office. Now, if we take a look at who did better on wage growth, right? So only 4 years. We're talking 4 years of Republican leadership versus 12 years of Democrats in the last 16. Who had the best wages and wage growth? El Trompito, Republican. Who had, at that time, the lowest in history Black unemployment numbers, Latino unemployment numbers, Asian unemployment numbers? El Trompito, Republican. In those 4 years, how many wars were actively started by Trump? 0 new wars. Who got the Abraham Accords in place to create peace between Israel and Bahrain and the other countries that were involved in the Abraham Accords? Trump, Republican. Who got NATO to pay their fair share? Trump, Republican. The only one. During those 4 years, how many times did Russia launch an incursion on Ukraine or some other neighboring country? 0 times in Trump's 4 years. So yeah, if you look at the last 16 years, 12 of them led by Democrats, only 4 years led by Trump. I'm taking Trump. Those are the odds I want. Those are. I'm not a betting man, but who wouldn't want those odds? Who doesn't want higher wage growth? Who doesn't want a higher GDP? Right? And I don't. I think the math is fuzzy on President Clinton's job creation numbers, but I can tell you this: if he says it's Republicans won, which does not sound accurate to me, but if even if it is, then by those same numbers, I'll go with the numbers that Joe Biden put out. If it's 50, then it's really 49, because 1 million of those jobs are fake, phony, and fraud. So you've got 1 million fake jobs under Clinton, and he claims 1 million jobs from Republicans. Still doesn't look good to me. Anyway, let's continue with your calls. Let us go to Frank, Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Hey. You used the word processor word count on Clinton's speech. How many times he used the word is?
Well, that depends on how you define the word is.
Yeah, some dictionaries say it's not a word, but
right.
Anyway. But
that's a joke from his deposition with Monica Lewinsky. Go ahead.
But he tore up the speech from the day before, and I think somebody else rewrote it to be more wokeful, and he never did give a definition of what joy means. And then let's see, what else could I say?
What do you think about the fake jobs, Frank? 800,000 fake jobs.
Every word you said about that, Trump is correct on that. There's no new jobs at all. It's pathetic. And by the way, I expected Oprah to have an opening similar to her TV show when she was in Chicago. And she had prizes for everybody in the audience.
You get a car. You get a car. You get a car. Yeah.
Yeah, oh Lord, won't you buy me a brand new EV, and it's all for you, and it's all free.
That would have been very cool. It would have grabbed a lot of headlines. Outstanding. Frank in Evergreen, Montana. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Folks, we're going to pause right here. We're going to come back to the speed round, your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
A lot of people say I do a tremendous job, and Rich Valdez does a tremendous job. I can tell you that. He's a fantastic person.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue with your calls. Let's go to Monica in Pendleton, Oregon. This is the speed round, so you got to keep it extremely brief and very, very quick. Monica, go right ahead.
All right. I'll try to be as quick as I can because my daughter wanted me to call in, but now she's on to something else. Well, you've told me before who's developed the whole 2025 thing and how the Democrats are just taking it out of proportion to make Trump look bad. And, well, she thought that, well, maybe the Democrats were behind it, and secretly they're pinning it on Trump. And now I have the suspicion, it just popped up in my head, that, well, maybe if they get in, then the whole thing be the other way around, where the leftists, there's going to be all those parades, blah, 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 while Christians have to go into hiding, prophecies, and how's that for a summarization to get my point out?
Yeah, gotcha. Well, listen, the 2025, Project 2025 is a report from the Heritage Foundation, and it was one of the guys who was the brainchild of it. He actually quit his job at Heritage because of all the controversy. But it really wasn't as zany as they were making it sound. And I don't think Christians need to go into hiding. I think everything's going to be just fine. As you'll see, that it's kind of died down as of late in the media, because when people started looking at it and realizing it's not Trump's, and that was the main allegation, that this was something that Trump endorsed. And he said, look, I don't endorse it. I just don't. And that's fine. Trump has been extraordinarily clear on his plans for the border and everything else. And he's out there every single day in front of 20, 30,000 people in these rallies, putting his policy positions out there. And I think that's one of the big differences that we see, right? You got Kamala Harris, who has a website with no policy on it. Trump has not only policy on his website, but he has a whole think tank, the America First Policy Institute. That's a bunch of scholars that worked in the Trump administration and other areas of professional life that are contributing to the body of scholarship that they put out. And this is a real thing. So it's very difficult to try and pin something on Trump that isn't Trump's, because he's got the bully pulpit, right? He goes out every day and he's in front of the media every day telling it like it is. And I think that's part of the appeal, that people say, you know what, I like this guy. He tells it like it is. One of the critiques that the Democrats have of Trump is that he's lying, or he's this and that. But I would say the exact opposite is true. Trump tells you things that are so brutally honest most of the time that people are like, oh, my gosh, can you say less? You don't have to say all the things that come to your mind, right? So I think you never have to think twice about where Trump stands. You always know where he's at. Monica, thank you for your call. Paul, Boise, Idaho, it's tight, but go for it, brother.
I was very happy to see today that Trump's going to have plexiglass around him when he's at his rallies.
Yeah.
And I only have one more request, that he has it on his golf cart. That's
like the Pope?
The Pope-mobile, like he thought it was. Not like that. On his golf cart, he needs it, because he'll be
like the Pope-mobile. I remember that. That was very, very cool. Thank you, Paul. Shout out to KBFI and, of course, KUMA, Pendleton, Oregon. And I appreciate the calls tonight. Looking forward to speaking with you guys all tomorrow. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.